Super excited to be here. I was actually at UCLA yesterday, which is kind of a nice alternative. This is a nice alternative to that, because in LA, like, everybody's just always freaking out about Hollywood. And as they should, there's a lot to worry about. But I really, really value what's been talked about today, and I love where this panel is going to go. That I personally find this subject area more exciting. I'll give you a little context on why, and we'll see why this didn't fit in the Google slides. There's so much to go over. But a little bit about me, and I'm going to get into present mode here. So this is me. That's my face. So my background is I came up in film and TV, actually working in New York. I was at A&E as a programming executive for about 5 years, and then I was actually part of the Viceland team. If some people watched one of the last efforts of starting a cable channel, it's very exciting, and then streaming destroyed everything. But it's fun to be a part of it. But I got to work with Spike Jonze and a really amazing team there. And that was really when I started getting a lot closer to journalism. So I think I bring this up because I think this in a lot of ways informs kind of why I have a lot to say on this stuff, because I've kind of been through a reality TV background, got very close to journalism, and then I moved out west to work at a company called Anonymous Content, which some of you may have heard of. We won the Oscar for Spotlight. In a lot of ways kicked off the premium television boom with True Detective and Mr. Robot. But I was heading up documentaries for them. So I think in sort of the push of premium documentary, when streamers were spending a lot of money on that kind of thing. So I got very close to things that I think were pretty high-level examples of people trying to tell the truth. I sort of have been pivoting over the last 5 years into emergent technologies. In a lot of ways, that's where my development exec brain is finding, frankly, more of a career path, if you think about what's going on in that Hollywood place I described. But I've been doing a lot of teaching in the space, so Curious Refuge, if anybody's interested, it's an online AI filmmaking academy of sorts. I created the AI for Docs class there. So that was really the beginning of me starting to treat this whole process as a real inquiry, because it was a very imposter syndrome moment for me, because, like, guess what? There's only like a handful of movies that really use AI. So it was, in a lot of ways, it was a class of, like, how can we or how might we? Machine cinema, I can tell you a lot about if anybody wants to talk about it, but it's a big community of creators. We have about 10,000 of them globally. Some people are here from our community. And that's kind of what I think I base a lot what we're going to see today, is that I'm kind of in the trench, so to speak, of what I think is happening at the creator level. And I think to me that informs this background, and I think how we can process this. I'm doing a lot of consulting with History Channel, which is another interesting setting for this, in the way that an institution like the History Channel, and how are they approaching AI. Starling Lab, we're going to learn a little bit more about, is a research center for data integrity, and I think that we'll see that that's a big part of this. But I teach at Chapman University, their cinematic AI class, so I'm very humbled by the academic prowess in this room. I'm mainly an adjunct, so I'm trying to keep up with you guys. But I think I in a lot of ways, I find this to be a very emotional subject. I think AI in general, every time I do consulting, I always have to do a bit of a vibe check and make sure that the people that are very angry about this are heard, people that are very uncertain about this, and I think there's a lot of things to process here. And I think this is at the center of it, in my opinion. I think this sort of experience we're all starting to have with our instincts of what is real and what isn't. I think the through the looking glass metaphor couldn't be more apt, because when you look in the mirror, it tends to be a real thing. And I think whether it's The Matrix or Lewis Carroll, that metaphor was played once, and I think we're walking through it. I think that's what this is officially happening at what our relationship with visual reality is. And I think as we get through this, I actually want to say that it's actually accelerating flaws that have been there all along. And in some ways, that might be the way to process that emotion, is that instead of feeling like something's happening, it's more like now we need to deal with it. So in my opinion, I don't think this is replacing truth and objectivity. I think it's forcing us to build a better relationship with it. I love that we got to see the trotting horse earlier. We're doing some film history today. To some people, this is other film history. This is the Lumière Brothers. This is a very famous moment when a room full of people were in a place like this, and they started freaking out as they were staring at this, because they thought a train was coming at them. This is not dissimilar. I don't know how much folks here are on socials, but this was a big deal probably about a month and a half ago. What is the date there? July 31st. This was 300 million people on Twitter and around the world got really excited about a trampoline with a bunch of bunnies on it. And most people at first just got excited because, wow, look at all those trampolines, look at all those bunnies. And in fact, it was an AI-generated image. And then people went nuts, and they started putting deers on the trampoline, and all kinds of funny stuff started happening. But the point is that officially is we're here again. We're at a point that we're staring at visual media, and our instincts are being challenged, and what are we supposed to do with it? And again, it can be funny. And I think that's kind of where, when I say this is a moment of emotion, there's mixed emotions, especially for me. I think there's actually, on the one hand, as we look at some of these examples, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of people that are very, they're intrigued by what's possible with new tools. Stephen Johnson's a historian. He's doing a lot of work with Notebook LM, which is a tool some of us might use from Google. And I'll try to keep this short, but he has this amazing anecdote of how does that tool light up his world as a historian. He's able to say, I want to write a book about the gold rush, and I want to find a new take, which any historian's going to have to go read a bunch of books or hire a bunch of people to write a bunch of, and it's a lot of work. Read all those books. He found a tool that lets him take, okay, here's the canon, here's like the best book ever written about the gold rush. He's able to add that PDF into this tool, and then he's able to add all these other books that he hasn't read yet, but he knows that those are from the Native American perspective. And without having to spend all the months that it would take to really analyze those different sources, he can just say, what's in this book that's not in those books? What themes are playing out in that book that aren't, and he now suddenly is able to like light speed his way into finding the story he wants to tell. That's an AI resource there. We'll talk again about Brian Eno, but I think that documentary is a really great example of somebody really pushing the envelope of using generative technology. And this is a still from a History Channel project that I helped bring in, that somebody brought to life the burning bush in the Bible in a way is hyper real, and they didn't have to hire a bunch of actors and go to the Middle East. There are interesting things that are worth processing through, whether it's our production workflows or our academic workflows. There's also a bunch of insanity happening. Elvis did not meet Kim Jong-un, and that looks like a really good picture that somebody might take seriously. We won't watch the trailer, but people should watch The Mountainhead on HBO Max. I'm not shilling it. I had nothing to do with it. But it is probably a documentary a year from now in terms of what happens in it. In terms of, like, if the plot of the movie is 4 amazing tech titans go to a mountain resort, and while they're there, presumably the Elon Musk one has started some app that he's so excited about free speech, he doesn't care that everybody is misreading the news, and there's civil wars happening, and all kinds of awesome stuff is happening. So it's a crazy movie. Thankfully it's still a movie. But, that movie came out around the time, and I hope this plays while we're here.
Here in downtown Los Angeles at the ICE riots. Holy shit!
Okay, sorry, it's a little small. That movie came out around the time that the ICE protests were happening in downtown LA, like very not far from where I live. Super horrific stuff. And I just, as I'm going to sleep, I'm doing what we shouldn't do of like scrolling through anything. And there's Bigfoot reporting from the ICE protests. And I went through a real crazy range of emotions. I'm like, first of all, that's hilarious. I love Bigfoot. I think he's super awesome. But that's like my community. We do that. These are our videos. We make stuff like this. They're using technology that had just come out, VO3. And that's like a really awful subject to do anything funny about. And this is 2 ticks away from just adding a regular person and not Bigfoot. And that's exactly the type of stuff that's in the Mountainhead, that I could put a fake reporter in a setting to just disseminate whatever they want to do. So yeah, that's upsetting. Let's all own that. So to me, that's sort of like what's at stake here as we're going through this. And to bring it back to like, how do we process this, is I think this is a trajectory that whether we like it or not, we've been on. Everybody knows what semiotics are. I used that word the other day, and everybody's like, what's that? So it's signals. It's like, it's the science of signs, right? So I really think, and this is coming from my reality TV, our trust signals have been reappropriated for a while now. And I'll own some guilt in that of having spent a long time working in that industry. I worked on this show called Storage Wars, and I literally sat on the other side of an executive desk when we were in the most innocent of times and nobody thought all the things were going to happen that came after. But I remember saying, like, it's like wrestling. Nobody cares if it's real. And I remember just saying that to an exec as they were pitching me new ideas. In retrospect, I'm like, wow, we basically trained an entire population to have that relationship of not caring if something's real. And how did we do that? We used lower thirds. We sat people in interview chairs. We did the thing that normally people that are newsworthy show up. And again, we're generationally well past this at this point. But that original thing that was like reserved for something that deserved attention, we just turned it into an entertainment tool. And there's Omarosa, part of the Apprentice team that today we're living with as well. And then also the social media adaptation of this. I mean, a lot of us might remember during one of the recent elections, the way Facebook, people just created fake newspapers. And because they had the fonts, they had the masthead, things that looked like newspapers would just start messing with us. So this has been going on for a bit. And then how far can this go? Now, where's AI accelerating this? You know, this thankfully has the red banner, but this is our good friends at Adobe. And this is their stock footage collection that historically is stuff that is trustworthy and it's good stock footage. In the early days of AI generated image, they were just kind of making stuff and, you know, licensing it. And then people are like, by the way, that didn't really happen in Gaza. That woman doesn't exist. That explosion didn't happen either. That protest is super like uncanny. So they had to, big public scandal, they had to pull it back, and then, you know, at least they put these little red bars over it. And now that's labeled and there's transparency layers. But this is how far this can go, is we can't trust our eyes anymore, much less the semiotics of lower thirds. This is a film that my friend Matt Zion, super talented AI filmmaker. For what, to his credit, he's doing all the right things. This film is lying, warning AI generated. He's doing the semiotics that we need there. But he did this as an experiment. He posted this on Reddit, and he posted a film that we can try to listen to a little bit. Let's see.
My generation, generated by AI.
So he posted on Reddit. It looks like a real gospel scene from a church. You'll see the lip sync from the preacher. He's singing some song that obviously doesn't exist. And he consciously did this as a filmmaker, and he comes from unscripted, by the way. He's not just doing this, but he's intentionally creating a moment of discussion that people would then on Reddit, like, which part's real? I can guess. And he's like, I'm not answering, because he's like, that's the point. Like, let's call this out. That's what he did with this film. And then if anybody needs to realize how crazy Sora 2 is, like...
I have a dream that Sam Altman wins over Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay, so as anybody who's following the news, this was a big scandal a week ago. Sora 2 either really thought nobody would care, or I kind of think did it on purpose just to create a news cycle. That's just my read. But yeah, like that looks really real. Like that has all the bearings of like the grain of an archival film. So it's just accelerating with AI. So just in this one topic. I also think we can look back into recent history and think about just the whole design of top-down narratives. Some of us in America might even have some nostalgia for Walter Cronkite and just how comforting it was when we all knew he told us something and we could all trust it. Obviously, that's changed. I mean, we don't have to get lost in talking about cable news, but obviously that's not the same. If anything, some of us even think this has created new streams for us to hear the citizen journalism that we prefer, whether it's Michael Moore or Alex Jones. Like, it's clearly spreading out in terms of just the design of anybody telling you something through a thing called a television. The social media world has only expanded on this. And if anything, we might argue that's a better thing. I think it's arguable that it was never well represented when it was a bunch of white guys running news organizations. Maybe this image here that's trying to capture a sense of more diverse representation was something most of us aren't looking to go backwards on. It's also the type of environment that the manosphere had a very powerful effect on a recent election, because that's how decentralized the process is. And I'm not going to play this video because it really upsets me. But yeah, we have rooms full of kids talking about that maybe the Jews had it coming to them, because media is free and it's all available and we can all just talk on the internet. So yeah, it's already in an interesting place. Maybe it's better that there's better representation. Maybe there should be filters on polarizing topics, but it's happening. And if you don't think it's going to get weirder, like take a look at avatars. So now we have a relative infinity of avatars that are and technology that's mainly being sold as customer service bots and sales bots, and it's happening. And this is just projected data that it's going to go from being a $20 billion industry to a $270 billion industry. So yeah, lots of people are going to use it. And then just as an anecdote, in China, where they don't care about most of the stuff we sometimes worry about, and for better or for worse, they're moving very rapidly towards these technologies. In that sort of QVC setting of online shopping, the avatars are doing way better than the humans. So it works better. So forget whether or not it's authentic or not, just the utility of putting a face on a screen, it's already working better. But then I try to also remember, like, maybe this is cool. Like, this is one of my favorite thought leaders, Don Allen Stevenson. He's really great to follow, super smart guy, very deep cut. You know, he's
isn't broken. It's been replaced. The version you see isn't the one I see. And algorithms, edits, omissions, and now even AI have turned our shared world into 1,000 private universes. If you don't agree on what's true, it's because we don't even agree on what
So he's obviously like weighing in on the subject matter, but I don't know, that's actually really creative. And I think like there's a way to start interacting with these things that obviously we know it's fake, and then what other value can it have besides being real or not? I think someone like Don Allen's doing something really creative. We can debate about that. I also think there's this myth of objectivity. And I feel it like documentaries to me have always been movies about real things. It's only recently that I think that and I say this within my community of documentaries, there's a lot of people that suddenly treat it as rigidly as journalism. I don't actually think, and I think this is a good debate to have, and it happens a lot, but to some people, Errol Morris is like a godfather of journalism. You know, he wrote a book. I love the conversation before about cameras and what is the subjectivity of a frame. Someone brought that up. That's literally what he wrote a whole book about, is that this is arguably the first war photography, so the Crimean War, and this is like a very debated picture about whether or not these were staged photos. And his main point was like, it almost doesn't matter whether it's staged. The documentarian who's ultimately delivering a story to you, it's his investigation. It's the rest of what they do with their story. And that's his case, and that's what he has to make about it. But I bring this up that I think to a lot of us, you know, this is what we might even love about documentaries, is that they take creative license. And if anything, the reputation of the filmmaker might be something that connects you with authenticity. It might even be the story that they then go on to tell you. If anything, there's a long history of documentaries that take a lot of creative licenses. And if anything, already sort of play with objectivity being something that isn't so rigid. So I think it's worth taking a look at, you know, and this is kind of what I teach in my AI for Docs class. You know, where is it now in terms of how is it used, and how is it behaving with that sort of objective space? So generative audio is probably the most shipped at this point in terms of a tool that is highly used. There's several Netflix documentaries. Frankly, there's also a lot of great best practices. There's a lot of people that are talking about what's the best way to be transparent about it. If you're dealing with dead people, how do you work with the estate? How do you bring them into the process? There's a lot of really good things happening there. This is also remarkable. Here's a documentary series where they pulled up the diaries of Andy Warhol, and it was off of 2 minutes of audio. And I actually didn't know that. Maybe somebody can correct me, but I think he only had 2 minutes of actual recorded audio in his whole life. That's incredible. They're able to then tell a story, and then as long as they tell us they're doing it, you know, somebody might enjoy that. The world of recreations is definitely like where History Channel is going, and this is a film that premiered at Sundance this year. David France, who actually we'll see again in a second, he directed it with Jesse Shortbull. It's about Leonard Peltier, and yeah, there's scenes that there was no cameras for. You know, that's what we do, reenactments. Like, this isn't unusual. We do those in documentaries. And they used generative AI as a tool, and they went through a whole process of how to do that transparently and ethically. But these are use cases, and they're solving problems for filmmakers. Frankly, I don't think docs usually have a lot of money. It's actually among the most independent filmmakers that I think need these tools the most. This to me is one of the greatest stories. This was 2019 when it was made. It was based off a Masha Gessen article in the New Yorker about this incredible story that I don't even know what's happening with it 5 years later, but of LGBTQ refugees in Russia and this whole community of people that were shuttling them to safety around Russia. And you know, by some accounts, this is an unmakeable documentary. Unless you're just going to put a black box over people's faces, or you know, blur them, or you know, do something silly. They found a way to use the deepfake tool, which is the scariest word for a technology, deepfake, and they used it for good. And they actually did a lot of really interesting things along the way, including that the fake faces that were put on the real people were queer activists. They were even people that not only gave their licensed faces over, they were people that are connected to the material. Right? They even intentionally left a layer on the edge of the face that was shitty, that it called itself out. And you're like, okay, I'm not totally, you know, lost in this. So again, these are just really intentional choices. So I think this is when, I guess, we can be scared about this stuff, but we can also start imagining what's possible. And I always just like flagging this. This isn't technically AI, it's generative technology. Has anybody seen this documentary? All right. Good, you guys are seeing cool stuff. So Brian Eno, David Bowie's producer, U2's producer, like a lot of famous music people, gets approached a lot, said no every time. So Gary Hustowit, who, if you want to see his other films, he makes movies about font, which you guys should check that out. That's, yeah, Helvetica is a whole movie. But he came up with a way, how do I reapproach Brian Eno? So he connected with a technologist friend who they created a hardware technology called Brain One. So they knew how to fluff the talent too, where they made an anagram of Brian Eno's name, and they're like, come on, we're just making something for you. Anyway, what it is that it makes the movie, it takes all the archival footage that they'd gotten, plus the many hours of interviews, and then every single time you see the movie, it's being seen for the first and last time. So there are 52 quintillion versions of this movie, and the filmmaker's never seen it, the editor's never seen it twice, the audience has never seen it twice. So to me, this is just like, we're starting to see what innovation could look like, and that starts to push the genre, and we're not losing a sense of authenticity, right? So to me, all of this sort of, again, this is that mix of emotions. Like, on the one hand, it seems like things are getting really bad, and how do we turn around? I think on the other hand, are we creating an avenue for new frameworks of trust? And that's really the work that I've been doing now with Starling. The point that my partner there, Mike Corona, would say is that, we've been here before. This is why postmarks are put on mail. This is why wax seals historically is because you want to prove that something was created, and there's a verifiable way to do that. This has been a choice that people have made before. So Starling Lab, not Starlink, nothing to do with Mr. Musk, but Starling Lab is a research group between USC Showa and Stanford, and there's this kind of glass-to-glass mentality of how do you go from the lens of the camera to the screen of what somebody's experiencing, and they're creating this capture, store, verify idea of how do you get there. So they've done amazing work with the Ukrainian war about how do they sort of jump in where a lot of photographers are being called out for fake news, alternative facts. They've come up with these cryptographic, and I know we have 2 minutes left, so it's going to be tough to explain blockchain technology in that amount of time. But that is the tool they're using. If anybody wants to talk about it, we can. We've run out of time. But this is sort of an example of what it looks like. This is a bombed out school in the Ukraine. And what they did is let's see. It'll play for a bit. It's a bombed out school in Ukraine where they got VR coverage of it. And as you can see, the experience of entering that space, at least at a metadata level and how you're starting to track this stuff actually at capture and at delivery, is how do you fill it up with geolocation, metadata, stuff that's cryptographically sealed. So they're basically creating like data trails and data experiences that can start to combat what does synthetic content do. This is the stuff that we've been working on. This is a still image. And now we're going to jump out here and look. This is Gaussian splat technology. So what we're jumping at is that this is where AI technology is going next, is we're now in a spatial stage where we'll be able to take a still image and create an entire 3D world that instead of even just looking at it, I can travel through it, a little bit like a video game, right? So this, basically anybody's going to be able to do this in about 3 months. Like, this is highly accessible technology. So our challenge that we brought to Stanford, and we created a whole class out of this, is how do we do like something like this with like a historical image? Like, this is a Dorothea Lange image from the Great Depression. How would you create a experience, like the way a museum creates an experience for you? They take you into interesting places, but it has that reputational energy of where the archivist brought it from. To me, this is worth looking at real quick, because also sometimes mistakes happen. I'll show this to you in a second. It takes a second to load. I know we're running out of time. I'm almost done. We're working with a filmmaker from Welcome to Chechnya about How to Survive a Plague documentary. It's about the AIDS protests in the 80s. This is a mistake, but it's pretty cool. I don't know. And then like you start to work with this technology, and we're obviously working very hard to keep it truthful, but this becomes where we're creative again. And maybe as we sort of develop a framework of how we can navigate this stuff, we also embrace the glitches, which is, I think, probably some of the flaws that we talk about, what makes photography interesting. So I just end on this note, is that I don't know if blockchain is going to save the world. I think a lot of people might disagree with that. But I do think we need to create this kind of more transparent medium of how we interact with these things, because AI is coming hard and fast, and our semiotics are all over the place. I know there's things like C2PA, and there's like some really amazing efforts. To me, the problem with those things is they live in the lab. Nobody's using them. I think Rotten Tomatoes, a lot of people use it. I think Wikipedia is very available to people. And I guess that would be my challenge to people that care about this too, is we can't just get lost in our sort of abstraction. We have to acknowledge that social media is not going away, and that is the audience. And that is where most of the confusion is going to happen. And I just feel that as a father of two, to me, media literacy and tech literacy are probably more important than sex ed in terms of how I'm approaching this stuff to them, because they could save their life if they understand what truth is. Anyway, I know I went over, sorry. That's me. Follow me on LinkedIn, that kind of stuff.